Hello and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today we'll be discussing the importance of standing up for Israel in the European Parliament and also in the United Nations, and that it's vital that Israel puts her case to these multinational international organisations to confront the growing international and diplomatic isolation of Israel that we're seeing in the world today. And in today's programme I'm joined by representatives from the European Coalition for Israel. In today's Middle East Report, I'm joined by Tomas Sandell, who is the founder and the executive director for the European Coalition for Israel, and also Dr. Gregory Lafitte from the French representatives of the European Coalition for Israel. Gentlemen, it's great to have you on the Middle East Reports, and Thomas, it's great to have you on the Middle East Report. It's usually the European Report, so welcome to the Middle East Report. Can you give us something about the calling of God upon your life and how he really led you to establish the European Coalition for Israel and the important work that you're doing on behalf of Israel through ECI?
Well, thank you, Simon. It's good to be on the program. Usually it will take me about an hour to share this testimony of how the Lord has led me. To put it in a nutshell, in 2001, many of us realized that Israel was very isolated in the world. This was the time of the Second Intifada, a time of rise of anti-Semitism in Europe. And we come to realize that in a city of growing importance as Brussels, there was nobody, and I mean nobody, standing up for Israel. And it was almost like a similar experience like Theodor Herzl had at the time when he witnessed the Dreyfus trial in Paris, that as a journalist, because that's my background, I was a journalist at the time, I came to realize that the situation was quite similar. The nations of the world had turned their backs on Israel, and this was especially true for Europe. So we said, listen, we failed the Jewish people in the 30s. We cannot do it again. This is our Kairos moment to speak up and stand up and be counted. And this is how the European Coalition for Israel started gradually with the vision in 2001. In 2003, we got to the part when we could constitute a coalition. So this year, 2013, we are actually celebrating the 10th anniversary of the European Coalition for Israel.
Excellent. And Greg, I think you've been on a European Report and Middle East Report last year, so it's good to have you back on.
Good to be back.
Can you share with our viewers particularly how you came to know the Lord and how he put a love for Israel and the Jewish people on your heart? And my third question, in one question, how you became involved in the very important work of ECI.
How long do you have? No, I'm kidding.
We've less than 56 minutes, so bear that in mind.
Well, I mean, I met the Lord while I was quite young. It was really a personal encounter with the Lord. And my parents have been supporters of Israel since well before I was born, and I started to understand a bit more about the whole question of Israel and what the Lord is doing with the Jewish people, and has been doing from the very beginning and still doing today with the Jewish people. And then I lived in Israel for some time, and so I felt really concerned about Israel and what's going on today in the world with the Jewish people.
No, that's good. And Thomas, I just want to bring you back on this one. I know that I've probably asked you this a few times on the European Report in the European Parliament in Brussels, where we have a film program together. But how did your involvement in creating a Holocaust Memorial Day in the European Parliament start, because I know that you and Hannu Takala, the fellow Finnish MEP, was so instrumental in getting the Holocaust Memorial established in the European Parliament.
Well, in 2005, the coalition had been up and running for 2 years. So we were looking at different ways of bringing Israel back into the core of the European Union. And we could think of no better way than to commemorate the victims of the Holocaust. You also have to remember that this was the time when the United Nations came out with this resolution to make the January 27th an annual day of Holocaust commemoration around the world. So we have the timing, of course, was perfect, and we decided together with our friend Hannu Takula to organize the first ever Holocaust Remembrance Day event in the European Parliament. And I remember, I think we had a good number of members of the European Parliament, but it was not a large meeting, maybe less than 50 people, but very, very significant. So when we are looking back today, again in 2013, what has happened is that soon after, the President of the European Parliament came on board and he said, well, this is wonderful. I want to give my patronage to this event. And last year, the President spoke and he said, well, now I want to make this an official European Parliament event that will always be in the calendar of the European Parliament, regardless who is president. So what you can say is that a small organization such as ours, by taking this small initiative and step in faith, we're able to shape EU policy for years and years and years to come. And we feel very happy and pleased and privileged to have been able to bring back the remembrance of all those 6 million Jewish people who perished and died in Europe.
Yeah. Thomas, it's okay if I just take one step back a bit, because I think it's important to establish with the viewers the work that's been carried out by the European Coalition for Israel, because you become such a recognized face on Revelation TV thanks to the European report, but it'd be good to know what ECI does, the focus and the remit of the organization as well, before we talk more about confronting anti-Semitism and remembering the Holocaust.
You can sum it up in 3 words: prayer, education, advocacy. And all those 3 aspects are key for the work that we are doing. Starting with prayer, to say this is a Christian organization. We know that these things that we are dealing with are active in the unseen world. So it's not only an intellectual discourse to try to organize a symposium to discuss and discuss and discuss, but it is a matter of prayer. Education, because it says again in the Word of God that God's people perish because of lack of vision or because of lack of knowledge. There is a need to re-educate the church, but also the greater civil society, about the role of Israel, first and foremost in the Bible from a biblical point of view, but also historical, legal, culturally, so that you are able to defend Israel on every level. So thirdly, this is what we call advocacy. Some people may call it lobbying, but speaking on behalf of Israel, not being Jewish or Israelis ourselves, not even American. So as Europeans meeting these elected leaders, meeting the EU officials, and pleading the case of Israel.
No, very good. And Gregory, I want to bring you on board on this one. What is your role within ECI? Because you're very much involved in a lot of the work to do with the United Nations.
Yes, well, it all started something like 3 years ago when we, the coalition, we met in San Remo, Italy, to commemorate the San Remo resolution of 1920, which was part of the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. And then we realized there that the legal rights of the Jewish state come back to 1920. It's in 1920 that really the the rebirth of the Jewish state was inscribed into international law. And so that's where the journey started for me in the coalition. And after that, it's I got to thank the Palestinians, I guess, because they wanted to try to find a way to make a unilateral declaration of their state at the UN. And so we started going more and more at the UN to try to explain that that's not the good way. That's not the good path. The good path is through negotiations and through coming back to bringing the two parties together to talk and not just to impose a solution, something coming from nowhere, and just declare that a state exists. And because if you do this, you have to declare what are the borders and the number of issues. All these issues must be resolved through negotiations.
Excellent. So, Thomas.
Can I just add a little bit? Gregory will remember that we met actually the first time in Evian.
Yes.
In 2009, if I'm not mistaken. This was the time of the Durban II conference, the UN conference against racism, which took place in Geneva. The reason why I'm bringing that up is that on that day we had a commemoration event in the synagogue of Evian, because we were looking back at what happened in that city in 1938. And I often, when I try to explain what is ECI, I said, well, we're trying to do what the Christians failed to do in 1938 in Evian, when Roosevelt called together the nations of that day, asking him one simple question. We have 200,000-300,000 Jews that are stuck within the German borders. They can't get anywhere. Can we take them as refugees? And nation after nation came back and said, well, this is a huge problem, but I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. And I always ask the questions, well, where were the Christians at that time that would have informed, where was the Revelation TV at that time that would have informed the Christian constituents and said, well, are you aware of this is going on? Are you praying about this? Are you advocating? Are you sending anyone there to speak to them? But nothing happened. It was also the last chance to stop Hitler. It has been said that this was the green light for Hitler to go ahead, because he had his people there. They came back from Evian and said, listen, Hitler, the nations don't really care. You can go on and do what you want to do. The nations don't care. Today, we want to send a different message, and we want to be at the forums like the Evian of the 1938 and ask ourselves the questions, well, where do we need to be in 2013?
Very good question. And maybe this clip will actually answer it. This is called ECI Brussels Report, a Holocaust Remembrance Event for 2013.
Dayan almanot vavi yetomim Bidei hagermanim hanatzim v'yozrehem v'she'alechu le'olamam. It has been several years that we have been gathering here to commemorate the memory of the Shoah, the lowest point of Jewish history, and also the lowest point of European history. This is the time of gathering storm clouds. Today is a day of mourning for over 6 million Jews murdered by Nazis.
There is anti-Semitism in Europe. there is a free elected member of a parliament of a member state of the European Parliament asking for registering Jews. This is a shame in Europe. This Remembrance Day is not an exclusive one-day event. It is a permanent duty, every day.
International Holocaust Day is a vital relay for the transmission of memory regarding the greatest catastrophe ever perpetrated by man against man. Memory which speaks to us about the present and the future as well as the past. Memory that warns us about man-made disasters that may still lie ahead.
There we saw in that really good clip some of the you had the Speaker of the European Parliament, the President of the European Parliament there, as well as Holocaust survivors as well. How important is it to the Jewish community, particularly in Brussels and across Europe, that there is an event called the Holocaust Memorial Day in which the whole of the European Parliament remembers the horrors that took place on European soil over 70 years ago?
I think it's very important. I've met Holocaust survivors that would say that, you know, when I see this is taking place in the center of the new political Europe, in the European Parliament, I can see that Europe is different. There is hope in Europe. And as I've said on previous occasions, I think we can be particularly proud and happy with this current president, who is taking this issue so much on personally, because his father was an officer in the German army. And I remember him saying last year that if we can have the son of a German officer as president in the European Parliament saying that he wants to take a stand for Israel and the Jewish people, that is a sign of hope, and in particular for the Jewish community.
And Gregory, we saw in that clip there that this is a joint event on behalf of Christians, the Jewish community, and other people in the European Parliament who are clearly concerned about the Holocaust and Holocaust Memorial Day. But looking at some of the EU's actions, the European Parliament's actions towards Israel and the Jewish people, and the rise of anti-Semitism, are they just paying lip service to the Holocaust?
No, I don't think we can say that, because Martin Schulz has an important role in the European Parliament, and it's just quite amazing that it has this importance now in the European Parliament, this Holocaust Remembrance Day, but the difficulty is, I think, remains the same. The difficulty is that sometimes we don't make a link between what happened then during World War II and what's happening now. So it's not only we have to remember, but think and understand that what happened then is something that is, we have to make sure it doesn't happen again, and to do that we have to understand, we have to have our eyes open and see what is really happening. Most of the Christians had their eyes completely closed during the 1930s. They didn't see it coming, and and it's something I don't see why we would be more intelligent than or more. I mean, we would see clearer than they did, and so I think that's why it's important to not only remember but have our eyes open and our spiritual eyes.
No, absolutely. And Thomas, now we're talking about the European Parliament itself, and you know, we share a programme together in the European Parliament. I've got to say, I do find it very much of a godless place. I find the European Parliament, the whole European institutions are pretty anti-God, as it were, and kind of very hostile environment, not only to Christians but also to the Jewish people as well. But so many of our viewers will think, well, you know, what is the point in the European Parliament when we have our own national parliaments, and if we have a particular issue we'll go to our local MEP. But how important is it that Christians who have a passion and love for Israel actually engage with their local MEP, contact them on behalf of Israel, and what difference does it make?
I think we need to be very pragmatic when it comes to prayer and influence. If we look at our Bible, we see that pragmatic people were people like Esther, like Daniel, like Moses. I don't think that the Egypt of Pharaoh was a very godly place. It was good enough for Moses, for Joseph. The same with Persia, looking at Daniel, looking at Esther. So I think sometimes our religious mindset, we tend to limit God. Problems, but nevertheless, we need to be there. This is exactly where we are needed as salt and light. It's like Evian 1938.
Yes.
I'm sure many people said, you know, why would we bother about going to France, this ungodly country, or an ungodly...
I'll let Gregory defend his own nation state in a minute.
Resort town of Evian. But we should be everywhere. You know, we should be at the UN, we should be at the EU, we should be at our national parliaments, regardless of what country we come from, and even beyond that.
Yeah. And Greg, what's your response to this? Because I know that you've got a heart for young people, and it's so important that we engage young people with a vision and the importance and significance of God's plans and purposes for Israel and the Jewish people. But isn't it important that the new generation now arise and actually take this mantle and take the fight that is Israel and Israel's cause to the heart of Europe, and get involved in the European Parliament with MEPs and also with our own political representatives in our own national parliaments?
Yes. Yes. Well, just to say something about France and Evian, I think the reason they came was because there was the ski resorts. I'm afraid that was the reason. But it's a terrible conference, and it's something we should all remember what happened in Evian. To answer your question, I believe that if we really start to realize that the whole, when you look at history and with a biblical point of view, I mean, the biblical point of view is not narrowing our point of view. It's really just telling us, showing us really how history happened. Things in history happened, and one thing is that the Jewish people is completely central to the story of humanity. And when you see all of those events and you see that things are still continuing now, and we're part of this history that is so well described in the Bible, then I think that there's nothing more exciting than that. And I think that's where any young people would want to be involved in something that is so much connected to making history somehow. Shaping history, and so that's where I think the exciting work is, and through prayer and through advocacy, and so that's where if I was young again,
you still are young.
Well, yes, I would. I mean, I would think exactly as I thought when I was, younger. Is there's nothing more exciting than what the Lord is doing right now with the Jewish people and with all the nations.
No, absolutely. And we've got a clip to go to now. This is taken from the European report from July of this year, which includes an Iranian expert and Daniel Hammond, MEP for the Conservative Party in the European Parliament in Brussels. So enjoy this clip.
And I think so many British people now are coming to that conclusion that...
well, let's find out. I mean, we'll have a referendum, and either I'll win or I'll lose, and either way, I'll accept the result.
Excellent. And also, you're a journalist as well, aren't you? I mean, I've read quite a lot of your blogs on
I write a
the
blog
Daily Telegraph.
which is hosted by the Daily Telegraph, and I used to work there before when I had honest work, I was a journalist.
Excellent. And Thomas, it's great to have you back on the European report. It's been a little while, so we've missed you. I know that you've been very involved with activities for Israel in the UN and also in Sweden. So can you share with some of our viewers some of the adventures you've got up to in the last couple of months?
Well, thank you, Simon. It's good to be back on the program, and we're very happy to have our Finnish viewers with us as well. Let me share briefly from our last event at the United Nations in May on Jerusalem Day, when we hosted a luncheon for some 30 diplomats, and we had 20 members represented. And basically we were looking at the position of the old city of Jerusalem under international law. And the interesting thing is that although members of the UN General Assembly are supposed to vote and have opinions on the matter, what was very clear during that conversation is that they very rarely have a chance to discuss the matter or have an expert speaking about the details of that very complex issue. So I think again that just by going there, by giving them this opportunity, by inviting again Dr. Jacques Gauthier, we could really make a difference. As it relates to Stockholm, we were there 2 weeks ago, and interesting things are happening in Sweden. It's the first country now where you have a Minister for Development Aid who is saying, listen, we're not going to continue to finance the Palestinian Authority if they are not interested in negotiating. So there is a proposal now from the government to cut some 20 million out of a total budget of 70 million, because they say, you know, this should be conditional, there should be a real interest for peace. And this is becoming an issue in the Swedish government. And it happened a week or 2 weeks after that we were there. So, of course, I'd like to think that there was some influence from our side. But interesting things are happening in Europe, at the United Nations, and we're so happy to be able to play a little part in this very complex puzzle.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to your contribution in today's program.
I'm sorry to butt in, but I just wonder whether you don't have a challenge, both in the United Nations and in the European Union, in the sense that both of those organisations, and particularly this one, the European Union, are predicated on the idea that national sovereignty is a disagreeable, dangerous and anachronistic concept. Now, Israel is the supreme example in human history of the national principle. There's nothing else remotely like it.
Correct.
Here you have a people who are stateless, scattered for 2,000 years, but who never lose the aspiration.
Welcome back to the Middle East report. That was me. I just had a shave. So anyway, I noticed, Thomas, you're wearing the same tie in that clip in July, and you're wearing the same one today. So that's good. But can you share with us, because it is a privilege, I think, to actually record in the European Parliament and to really make a stand for Israel by producing the European report, presenting it, letting other MEPs know of the importance that there is a strong Christian constituency across Europe that's willing to stand with Israel. But from your perspective, how important is the European report?
Yeah, I think looking at it from our perspective as European Coalition for Israel, it was a game changer when we started producing the European reports. It gave us visibility, but it also I think we really put a stake in the ground. You know, being so central in the heart of the European institutions, as you can see from the clip, with people just walking around, looking, well, who are these people? The faces are getting familiar, and they get to understand that here we have people who really are concerned for the Jewish people. And so I think it's something symbolic, spiritual, being there, speaking out the truth in a house where you know there are so many half-truths and not to say distortions of truth. and in a place where it's known for the animosity towards the Jewish people, to really stand strongly being a friend of Israel.
Excellent. And yeah, Gregory, I want to bring you in this one. I mean, we've got a great opportunity, not only with the European report, which we produce, and you've got to be a guest on one of our future programs, so it'd be good to have you as a guest. But also to discuss the fact that we can have an impact. I mean, one of the things that has made me so pleased about doing the European report is the impact that's had on the Jewish community in Belgium. Saying now that these Jewish leaders are saying, now you've given us a voice. The Israeli embassy in Brussels is saying, you're actually giving us a voice and we can put our side of the story together. And that's really making the difference, isn't it? By bringing in fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 40 to comfort my people and comfort Jerusalem. That by producing programs like this, working alongside the Jewish community and with Israeli representatives, that we're actually bringing comfort to Jerusalem.
Yeah, well, it is very important to bring comfort to the Jewish people today, especially since you can't really say there are many people doing that, and Israel is trying to find its friends, and there are very few friends of Israel, and for Israel to discover that they have friends in Europe. It's quite a surprise for them, and but I think it is important for Israel to see where the friends are, and it's not only in the United States, and I hope the United States still stays Israel's perhaps best friend, but in Europe there are also friends and Christians who are ready to stand with Israel.
Yeah, and also the other important work to focus on really is the important work you've done in giving Israel a kind of legal and historical claim to the land through the San Marino conference. Can you tell us how the fact-finding mission you're involved in discovered that Israel has strong legal claims to the land of Israel because of San Marino? Open to either of you.
Well, again, I think that is something which has taken ECI to a completely different level, starting in 2010, when we, by coincidence, of course there's no coincidence in this world, we believe the Lord God inspired us to think along these lines. When we came to realize in January of 2010 that in a few months' time, in April, it would be the 90th anniversary of the San Remo resolution. And it so happened that I think about a year earlier I'd met with Dr. Jacques Gauthier for the first time in Washington, D.C., and he had this thick book where he put down the legal case for Israel and the Jewish people to the right to their land, which was inscribed in international law in San Remo in 1920. And the funny thing is that most Jewish people have no idea about that. Yeah. And again, I see it as a privilege that we as Gentiles can come to the nations and say, listen, we want to honor commitments made under international law. If we want to have a just settlement solution to the problems, we have to look at history, we have to look at facts, we have to look at international law. And ever since we've been on this, journey, which have taken us from parliaments, from Rome to Brussels to New York to Tokyo, and each place we've had this enormous experience that people, like in Japan, take Japan as an example. Japan was one of 4 nations to sign the San Remo resolution. Nobody in Japan had the faintest idea of that Japan had played such a constructive and positive role in paving the way for the Jewish state. When it comes to our trip to Tokyo, it was so funny because we spoke about it for the first time in an evening meeting. The next day, we have a journalist coming up to us and say, well, I have been going to the archives online, and I found what you are talking about, the San Remo resolution, in Japanese. So it's like it's almost like going and sharing the good news for the first time to a new tribe, because for the Japanese people, this was such an eye-opener, something that they could be proud of as Japanese.
Amazing. So hopefully that open up stronger diplomatic relations between Japan and Israel.
Correct.
No, very good. And we've got a clip to go to now, and this is called Give Peace a Chance, that looks at the importance of the San Marino Conference and San Marino Agreement that provides the legal framework for the modern state of Israel.
Soviet Union, yes. United Kingdom, abstain. The United States, yes.
Resolution of the DUC Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstentions.
Resolution 181 in the United Nations General Assembly in 1947 paved the way for the rebirth of the State of Israel in 1948. However, did this give Israel legitimacy?
The answer is no. Generally speaking, in international law, General Assembly resolutions are not binding.
It's a wide myth. There's absolutely no truth that Israel's legal foundation is based on the UN Partition Resolution of November 29, 1947.
If the Jewish people and the Arabs had agreed to enter into a treaty based on the terms of resolution, then rights and obligations could have been created in international law. But that didn't happen.
The legal foundation of modern Israel really is initially traced back to the period right after the First World War, when the great powers at the time and the League of Nations, which was the UN of that particular period, had to decide what's going to happen to various former enemy territories.
Howard Grief began practicing law in 1966. For many years, even before that, he had an interest in Middle East affairs. In the 1980s, he began to examine long-hidden documents in the British National Archives that minuted the San Remo Conference of 1920. As a result, he published the book, The Legal Foundation and Borders of Israel Under International Law.
The San Remo Resolution. That is the basic constitutional document of the State of Israel under international law.
San Remo, the Villa de Vachon. This is the place where legal rights were granted. This is the place where legal rights were given to both the Jewish people and the Arab people.
Dr. Jacques Gauthier is an international human rights lawyer. For more than 25 years, his focus has been the legal status of Jerusalem under international law, which was the subject of his doctoral thesis.
It's in this place that the leaders with the power to make binding dispositions with respect to the Ottoman territories deliberated and made the decision, having heard claims from the Zionist organization in Paris in 1919 during the Paris Peace Conference, having heard submissions from the Arab delegation in respect to what they wanted in the Ottoman territories. Having heard these submissions, a group of them gathered here and made final binding decisions.
Welcome back to the Middle East Report. You can see the full 15-minute story on YouTube. Just type in European Coalition for Israel, Give Peace a Chance, and that video will come up. Definitely worth watching. Which brings me on, Greg, to talk about how in the United Nations, constantly Israel's legitimacy as an independent Jewish state sovereign over their own affairs is questioned. And considering how many new nations has emerged since the end of World War II, including southern Sudan, why is it only Israel that's singled out and questioned as an international nation?
Well, I don't have the answer to that. It's quite surprising. There are so many things surprising around Israel. You know, when you just consider that the Jewish people is a unique people, still having their language and existing as a people after having been scattered, brought back together to the land, scattered again. So Israel is a unique nation. But the United Nations, they have they've received quite a treatment, and what you were just saying, that there have been a number of nations being created after 1950. It makes me think of a remark that the present president of the General Assembly, the UN General Assembly, gave, I think 2-3 years ago, and he was saying that we have to look at history and understand that since 1950, nations have always been created by having negotiations, through negotiations. It's never has any nation been created unilaterally. I never know how to pronounce that word. Sorry. At the UN since 1950, and this applies to the Palestinians today. And to have the president of the General Assembly, so he was saying that concerning Kosovo. But it's something that applies to today. So yes, Israel. When it comes to Israel, everyone see things differently. It's not the same thing when it comes to Israel.
Yeah, and Thomas, I know very much that you were in New York last year when the Palestinians attempted another kind of independent declaration of independence at the UN with the Israeli delegation team. Can you explain such incredible work that the Israeli government is doing, particularly Ron Prosser, who's the Israeli ambassador to the UN, is doing to put Israel's case in what is only considered an incredibly hostile environment for Israel?
Yeah, I think it's clear for everyone who had a chance to watch news from the United States to understand that their ambassador is doing a tremendous job in presenting the case for Israel for anyone who wants to listen. Obviously, I would also mention the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who I think is the most eloquent spokesperson for the state of Israel that you can have. So I think with combining these two great minds in the UN General Assembly, the message for Israel could never be articulated more clearly for people to understand. And I recall still last year when we were there, listening to the speech of Netanyahu, listening to the speech of Abbas and Ahmadinejad, and the thought came to me that it was such a difference in the tone and in what was presented. So it's like the nations could not have been presented with two different scenarios of life and death than what they heard. And if they still miss the point and choose to go against Israel, I think there are no excuses.
Yes.
Yeah. And Gregory, I want to bring you on this one because clearly it states in Genesis, and God states to Abraham that I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. And considering how many nations are made up within the UN, it's becoming a big bloc. There's the old former Soviet Union bloc and also the emerging Islamic bloc in the UN that seem to be condemning Israel at every possible occasion. How do you put Israel's case to the UN when clearly Israel doesn't have many friends, and even the US administration are not willing to put diplomatic efforts in to defend Israel and Israel's cause?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's partly. I mean, all you said is true, except perhaps I believe we should. The U.S. administration should be commended for what they do at the UN. They've been defending Israel in a way that no other nation has been defending Israel. The previous ambassador of the U.S. to the UN, Susan Rice, was incredible at defending Israel, and when she gave a summary of her 4 years there, one of the big things was defending Israel. So Israel does have still, I hope for some time now, still at the UN, and it's the US. Sorry, what was your question?
No, I think you answered it very well there, Greg. We've got a clip to go to now, and instead of looking at Israel from a defensive position, let's look at Israel from an offensive position. Let's see and learn from the speech of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in which he gave to Congress, in which he said that Israel is what's right about the Middle East.
The Middle East stands at a fateful crossroads, for an epic battle is now underway between tyranny and freedom. And like all of you, I pray that the peoples of the region choose the path less traveled, the path of liberty. Israel has always embraced this path. In a region where women are stoned, gays are hanged, Christians are persecuted, Israel stands out. It is different. We have a free press, independent courts, an open economy. Courageous Arab protesters are now struggling to secure these very same rights for their peoples, for their societies. We're proud in Israel that over 1 million Arab citizens of Israel have been enjoying these rights for decades. Of the 300 million Arabs in the Middle East and North Africa, only Israel's Arab citizens enjoy real democratic rights. I want you to stop for a second and think about that. Of those 300 million Arabs, less than 0.5% are truly free, and they're all citizens of Israel. This startling fact reveals a basic truth. Israel is not what is wrong about the Middle East. Israel is what is right about the Middle East.
I think from that clip that we should all be part of what is right with the Middle East by standing with Israel and declaring the incredible freedoms that Israel have in comparison to her neighbours, as she's the only true democracy in the region, as a beacon of light in a region that's becoming darker and darker and more dangerous. This is what I find, Thomas, so extraordinary, that here is Israel's attacked by the EU, by the UN, by different nation states, by NGOs, by journalists and the media. And yet we saw from that an incredibly inspirational speech from the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, that Israel is what's right about the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And all I can say is, why can't the world actually get this and see this?
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's the same question that we're all struggling with. We think this is clear, and as I was saying earlier, particularly with such good spokesmen as Ambassador Prosor and Prime Minister Netanyahu, they are so articulate in explaining all these simple things. Still, the large part doesn't get it. Again, I mean, one can elaborate and one can try to think of explanations. I think if we avoid the spiritual dimension, we are not getting to the core of the message. Anti-Semitism or hatred against the Jews is something which has been with us for a very, as long as we can record history. And in particular, it has been in Europe. So if we are seeing a rise of not only anti-Semitism, but anti-Israelism, people really hating the fact that there exists a Jewish state today, it has been more the common norm in European history than the exception. And I think the only sort of time in European history, in recent history, that we've seen of relative positive attitudes towards Israel was after the Holocaust until 1967. But apart from that, we have to remember Europe was no better in the 20s, in the 30s. Europe was no better in the 1880s, in Russia, you know, in Ukraine, in Poland, going back to the Middle Ages. So this is a European problem.
Yeah. I think we're down, gentlemen, to the last 3 minutes of the programme, so this one's gone very fast. So it brings me to ask you the question, Gregory. We've seen the challenges that Israel face in the EU, in the United Nations. Now, surely it's time for the next generation of Christians to arise, take up this challenge, and start fighting for Israel and the Jewish people. What is the best way if you're young and you're a Christian out there and you want to know what to do with your life? How can they be inspired, basically, to do something special?
Well, you know, we focused a bit on the negative things because there are a number of negative things. But I think there are some very positive facts right now concerning Israel. And those facts are that there are nations that are ready to somehow align with Israel, to stand with Israel. And in the United Nations, there are many nations going against Israel, but there are also a number of nations who would like to be able to stand with Israel and to have a voice to be able to stand with Israel. And it's not only just there are not only just enemies, they are really potential friends of Israel in the United Nations.
Yeah, I think we're down to just very quickly, Thomas. I know that you've got an event you're organising in Geneva for young people. Can you share something about this and how if young people want to attend, how they can attend?
Well, send an email to info@ec4i.org or go to the Call Geneva. If you type in the Call Geneva 2013, there will be a particular prayer meeting, but also a School of Reformation, where we have a very interesting speaker from Canada, sharing the experience, how things changed in Canada when it comes to relations to Israel, how Canada became the best friend of Israel in the world today, that all of this is possible when God's people wake up, you know, they start praying. And it's just simple, ordinary people like you and I and Gregory who can make it happen. I think Faitine, who will be speaking, she said it's just a ministry of showing up. Only thing that the Lord is asking for us is to show up. But He can't do it. He won't do it for us. He needs us.
Gentlemen, I just want to thank you so much for joining me on today's Middle East Report. And Thomas, it's good to have you on the Middle East Report for the first time. I look forward to working with you in Brussels next month for the European Report. And I want to thank you all for watching today's programme. That we've seen today, and we've outlined the challenges that Israel faces in the European Parliament, in the EU, but also in the United Nations. And each of us can play a major role and make a difference if we pray for Israel, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, we let the Jewish people know, we let Israel know that we're standing with them, that we can make a real difference. And certainly do that by writing into our MEPs, our MPs, and by making sure that we're not quiet on these important issues. And so let's remember that Israel is what's right about the Middle East, not what's wrong about the Middle East. So thank you for watching today's Middle East Report.
Rockets are no excuse. Suicide bombers, it's all just a ruse. Unless your Israeli self-defense is a right, Jewish army response is disproportionate might. The activists sail to deliver their aid. Jihad cash is what they were paid. Turkish delight in the media's glare. Slashing knives don't seem fair. Oh, בתפור זה עובר, בצ'צ'ניה עושים לא חסר, רק לישראל אין זכות להגן, כי מדם יהודי העולם מתעלם. In the whole Middle East, just one strip of land. Since we gave them Katif, no one's given a damn. Surrounded by soldier held in Hamas and Gaza, starved and tormented in the Uden-free plaza. The humanist convoy could have delivered a word. The Red Cross of silence was preferred. Oh, לאיראן יש גרעין, טורקיה כובשת את צפון קפריסין, רק לישראל